It's cooking with Cuisinart. Great recipes from master chefs. Now, one of America's greatest chefs, Hubert Keller, from Fleur de Lis in San Francisco and Las Vegas, the Burger Bar in Las Vegas and St. Louis, and Sleek Steakhouse in St. Louis. And now, today's recipe.
So what I'm doing right now is actually an omelette, and I want to show you how to actually roll nicely an omelette just by using a non-stick pan, and to see how really nicely the omelette folds over and having all the different ingredients actually into the omelette. Over here, for example, I have some Parmesan cheese, I have a little bit of bacon, I have some asparagus, I have some mushrooms. What I'm starting with is first I start on beating the eggs with a little salt and pepper. That's the first thing. So you really want to make sure that you're beating nicely the eggs before putting them in the pan. So actually the way I like to use my omelette is just plain 3 eggs. When you have some really nice fresh eggs, I don't think you need anything else in there. That's just that nice eggy flavor that makes the best omelettes. That's at least how my grandma used to do it. Although you have to make sure you really beat them nicely prior to put them into the pan. That's very important. And then once we have that, then I'm going to add a little piece of butter into the pan. Just going to melt the butter right into the pan. We make sure we're buttering the edges and everything of the pan. So now I'm just going to lower the eggs into the pan on like just a medium heat, not too hot. So you're putting the eggs right in there. And you see once you beat the eggs really nicely, it's almost like nice and runny. So now you want to, with the action of shaking the pan, you want to kind of start on cooking those eggs lightly and folding the cooked part from the bottom of the pan into the egg mix just by that movement here. Just like that. And of course, when it's halfway through, now gonna come the time I'm gonna introduce all the ingredients in the omelette, and you see how it actually cooks. So very quickly, let me put some ingredients in there. Little bacon, little cheese, little asparagus, little cooked portobello mushroom, extra bacon. And once I have that, now you're gonna make sure you clean the edges of the pan. Always by shaking it, it's very important. So now comes the time, I really want to make sure that the omelette starts on coloring on the bottom. So I let it sit, and I really like my omelettes, in particular, a little bit runny in the center. I think it's so much more tasteful. So once we have the omelette going, I'm just going to give them, like I said, a little bit heat from the bottom. So now you see how my omelette is letting loose here. What I'm doing now, I'm just going to start on folding the omelette slightly over. And I still keep it on the burner over here. I'm just going to fold it, fold it, fold it, fold that one over here. And I'm really sealing in now all the ingredients. And you see how I'm actually giving the angle to the pan. Now I start on coloring that omelette at the edge of the pan. So again, I'm just folding it in. And as I'm getting the color, we can actually look a little bit into it to see how we're doing. And then now comes the time, I'm just going to roll it over. So now you hold the pan that way. You make sure actually you turn off the gas. And then you see it by that movement. You have it like that. And you just shift it over. And then now I want to show you another little trick, just in case it doesn't come out. You always can use a clean kitchen towel, and that's sometimes what I do in kitchens. You put the kitchen towel over the omelette, and actually using your hand, you give them the perfect shape the way you want it, and then you unveil it, and you can see how really nice that omelette is. So that's a little secret right there. So now I want to garnish the omelette with a little cherry tomato, just to add a little bit of color. So put a little cherry tomato right there. And now, of course, I'm going to put a little asparagus tips on the omelette. So let me just put it there, here, and here we go. So those have been blanched, and of course they are cooked. So we just put them on there, and here we have it. It's a nice little runny omelette, very easy. All the elements are concealed inside, and when you're cutting to the omelette, you will see all the ingredients are appearing. So now that I finished the omelette, I will show you the perfect secret to make a wonderful scrambled eggs. So what I'm doing first, I'm using one of those pots. I'm going to remove that. And we'll put some heat under the pan, just like medium-high heat. And bring my eggs over here. So what I do with the eggs, I use a little bit of salt and pepper just to season them. So a little pepper, a little bit of salt. And so it's very important that actually you're whisking those eggs really, really well. Just like that. And comparing that with the omelette, where I like to keep my eggs the way exactly they are without adding anything, when it comes to scrambled eggs, you want them a little bit more creamier. And in order to get them nice and creamy, you just pour a tiny little touch of cream into the eggs. Okay, so once I have that, and you make sure you're really, really beating those eggs. And I'm using a non-stick sauté pan here, so of course you want to use one of those whisks which doesn't scratch your pan. So now let's put a little bit of butter into it. Okay, just going to melt the butter. And here I have about like 6 eggs that I have ready. You want to make sure you're really nice and buttering the pan. So now what I'm doing, and that's really important, and I guess that's a little secret for some great scrambled eggs, you do not stop on actually stirring the eggs the time they're heating the pan. So again, I'm just going to pour it in all at once, and then now what I'm doing, I'm really going to lower the heat to extremely low and just going to stir with the whisk, and you see how everything comes nicely together. And I take all the eggs who are cooking on the bottom of the pan into the center, and that's how I'm ending up with some great, great scrambled eggs. So of course the time that this egg's actually cooking, I'm adding my little ingredients, which one of them is some portobello mushroom, and actually stir the portobello mushroom right in it. And then the portobello mushrooms, I sauté them in a little bit olive oil prior to put them in the omelette. So now I'm actually adding a little bit of ham to it, and keep on scrambling. You don't stop, and if you see that the heat becomes a little bit too high, you just lower the pan over nice and gently, just to keep the temperature low. So you really want to cook those scrambled eggs on low temperature. So once you are here now, let me add some fresh herbs into it. So I have some fresh basil. I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of fresh basil over, and a tiny little bit of sage. Sage, you have to be careful when you cook with sage. It's usually pretty powerful when it comes to flavor, so you don't want to overdo it. And my last little trick in there, before I put it back and finish it cooking, I'm adding a little marinara sauce. So that's something that you actually can buy to make it easy on you. I'm just going to add a little bit of that into it. Now we're going back on the fire, and I finished the scrambled eggs. So here we go. I'm going to stir that in. So now you see how nice and colorful it becomes. The time I'm cooking the scrambled eggs, what you're really looking forward to is really to keep it nice and having these little lumps in there, but still that the whole mixture stays kind of nice and creamy. You don't want to have any big pieces of eggs cooked in there. You really want to break down the eggs to the smallest, and that's why I like to use a whisk instead of actually using a spatula when you cook your perfect scrambled eggs. And then it's good to give that little shake in the same time as you're cooking it, right? It doesn't hurt either. It just helps to bring the scrambled eggs together. So now when I have them that stage, it takes about 2 minutes until you will see how everything comes nicely together. Okay, so I guess now you can see the consistency of the eggs the way I really want them. They're nice and scrambled and still pretty runny, and you don't have any lumps in there. That's exactly the way I like the eggs. And then what you can do is when you cook them to that stage, a last little trick is actually adding a tiny little piece of butter at the end of it just to stir it in and to make these eggs even a little fluffy before we actually transfer them on the plate. So here you can see how nice and creamy they are. So once I'm at that stage, let me just plate those scrambled eggs. Okay. And once I have that, I want to top it a little bit with the marinara sauce, just for the color. Just like that. And of course, I want to sprinkle the herbs that actually are in the scrambled eggs. So a little bit of basil. And since we use some sage, I'm just going to top it with a little bit of sage leaves. And that's basically how easy it is to make perfect scrambled eggs, which are nicely scrambled and you don't have any big lumps of eggs in there. And that's just by using a whisk instead of a spatula. Also, when it comes to the amount of butter putting in there, if you're concerned about your diet, really, you can even reduce 1 or 2 egg yolks in it when you make the scrambled eggs. And by using the whisk, it's still going to make nice and fluffy, and you definitely can reduce also the amount of butter. It's still going to work wonderfully.